without further ado, we're going to start on the last keynote conversation. And I'm just going to ask both Sanjay and Frauke to just say who they are and to tell you a little bit about the work their organizations do. And I'm actually going to start with Frauke because I realize that you've all seen her, met her, you know that she's part of this conference, but you might not know what ASAFF actually does. So Frauke, over to you.
Yes, so usually in my daytime work, I'm not dealing with catering and walking people to hotels, but I love to do that, and because I would really like to attend the next Build Peace conference, actually, because I see how many interesting talks and people are here, and I had hardly time to speak of you, but I hope I made the good, together with my team, I made a good, atmosphere and space for all of you to have this conversation. But thanks. That is also my work, or our work at ASAFF, that we are more in the background and give the people the space, help them to connect, actually, to find their way to find better narratives. That's what we are very much focused on. We think that the better stories can get people together, and we tell the stories by artistic processing or artistic approaches, but also we combine them together with science, with people from administration and also from people from the NGO sector. So basically all of the people who are also joining this conference. And that seems like normal, but those people usually don't work together or working on a project. We call them cultural projects, but today, this afternoon, you're going to see one of these projects we are working on. It's called Heimspiel, which is actually, I don't know the English word. Valentine, help me. Heimspiel, what is Heimspiel? If you have local, if you're in your own stadium and you have your football match, so home match. Easy. So you're going to see, because we are not only seeing culture as things happen on stage, but also culture in sports. And it's really important to get people from the sports involved in all democracy work, especially here. So you can see this afternoon one of these projects together with Valentine. We organize a football game, and we will present one of these topics. But we are also working on people's stories who are not heard and seen, and make them more visible also through arts, which is for instance, a theater play and an application, comic application on the web about the contract workers' history, like the Vietnamese people living in Chemnitz, which you might have seen somewhere, but maybe you didn't see their stories, and their story is not in the archives of this town. So we made interviews, and now they are told by themselves. And yeah, this is kind of examples from our work.
Thank you, Frauke. And what about you, Sanjay? Tell us about Sole.
Okay, good morning. So my name is Sanjay, and I'm the founder of Soul Colombia. Soul stands for Self-Organized Learning Environments, and basically a soul is a physical space where you have people, less computers than people with internet connection, and big questions. And we call them big questions because they're interesting questions, tough questions, something which is in everybody's interest, and so it's engaging. And basically what happens in a self-organized learning environment is that people self-organize to find the answers to the questions using their peers and the internet, so that nobody's teaching. And I don't know if you know, but in Colombia, the government has spent tons of money putting computers and internet in a lot of public spaces. And for a very long time, people didn't use them because people didn't know what the internet was for. So we started it back in 2014, working with the government, going to these places and showing the person who is in charge of that space. So think of it, public schools, public libraries, public internet kiosks. We went to show the person in charge of the computer room how to turn that place into a self-organized learning environment, into a soul. And since then we've seen, so this was invented by an Indian guy to work with kids, but then as we were going to public spaces, we were working with all ages, because kids go with their parents, with their grandparents. And then we realized this was a very powerful tool for dialogue as well. So we thought, 2016, we signed a peace agreement with the FARC guerrilla in Colombia. And we thought, wow, this is a wonderful opportunity to really get people to talk, because we don't know how to talk to each other. And we've been, ever since, trying to reach like the furthest places in the country. And most recently, we've been to 15 of the municipalities most affected by armed conflict, setting up souls for communities to learn whatever they are interested in learning, create dialogue, and drive towards action. So that's a little bit of what we're working on now.
So two organizations finding different ways to surface narratives, to surface questions, and to connect in different ways. And yesterday, you did something together. So Sanjay, do you want to tell us what that was about when you did that?
Yeah, so we set up a great conversation. We called them great conversations because it's like not an ordinary conversation, it's a great conversation. It's not your day-to-day conversation, basically, because it's a conversation with a structure, and with a structure and with tools which allow you to have this conversation. So what we organized was a great conversation with people of Chemnitz. We had like 20 people, and so it was like half were some of you from this crowd, and also people from the community of Chemnitz. And we brought them together in this space to talk of a big question. We actually thought about it a lot, so that's like the key to a good soul session, is to have a good question. The question was, how could we help a neighbor who is feeling vulnerable to work through this feeling together, and how to do it in the next 6 months? And so the question brought all of us together to answer this. So the first thing you have to understand, the important thing of a soul is that you have people. More important than the internet is the people, because those are the ones who are going to self-organize to find the answers. And here, I think it was very powerful that Frauke invited people over, and people came. No? And that when we thought, will they come? And they came. And we also had people from this crowd, so it was very interesting to have this diversity in the group, because when you have such a diverse group, then you have a very interesting conversation going. And then you have to have a good question which is engaging and which makes it work. So basically what happened yesterday, we came together, the space was organized so as for people to feel comfortable. We even had Colombian coffee, which I brought. And basically what happened is we let people get into the groups they wanted to work in and look for answers. Some of them used the internet, some of them didn't, but tried to suggest answers on how to solve that question, and then come together to present the question, to present those answers. And the more interesting than the answers that come out from there are the new questions which come out. Because with those new questions, you can iterate the process, and that's how you go deepening in the knowledge and go deepening in the experience, basically. So just to say, a couple of questions which came out at the end of it were things like, how do we value the feeling of someone who we don't agree with? Or how to encourage or empower or invite people to reach out for help? Like, no, because we said, no, we have to wait for somebody to say they want help. How do you get people to do that? So this shows a little bit of where the conversation went, and well, I'll stop there for now.
Great. And you said that Frauke invited people, right? And actually, you shared with me yesterday that some people, when they came in, Sanjay asked them, why are you here? And they didn't know, what were you expecting? And they said, oh, I don't know. I just came here because Frauke told me to. Which I think is a lot about Frauke, the trust that she has, right, with people, that people would show up because that's what they were asked, and that there's a trust in your invitation. But you weren't actually there. So tell us why you weren't there, and then what you feel about what came out of this conversation.
It might also have been the Colombian coffee, but why the people were there. No, just never joking. Actually, I would like, of course, it was my wish to be there and learn from this thing which we were preparing for weeks, and asking, like, having like some ideas of which question is, like, for all people I invited to, is a core question. So I would love to be there. But then came in like the information about what happened the evening before. So the incident before the hotel, and we were all like from the organizing team, and especially I say especially me from this town, feeling very much responsible actually for that, so that we met, we go through all the plans. We already were planned for this, fortunately, but unfortunately we had to do. And so I was quite busy at that time and couldn't be there. But in a way, that's how my work in general should work, that it should work without me. So I was sure that they feel comfortable, that they know, and that all the people we invited to have a safe space, they can communicate, and we will still continue and have all the contacts with all the people who were inside.
But Frauke, I want to stay with you for a second, because there's a connection, right, in between the fact that you were responding to what was a racist incident and some of the things that were being discussed in the room. And we were talking about that at lunch afterwards. So what do you think about the conversation that happened in the room and you know, what came out of it? And I guess my question is also, what do you think about how that methodology of arriving at a conversation about what is happening in Chemnitz compares to the kind of methodologies that you use at SRFF?
So it was really I came in and they were not really theoretically talking about an incident, but really because the question was really much and pretty good posed, I guess, because it was really concrete, my neighbor next 6 months. And so everybody could react to that and had some vision, not somewhere far away, but right now. And then I came in, had to inform the workshop people, and it was like I'm posing or I'm informing about something which they are right now discussing. So it was really present, but it was also whom do we still continue talking to? And I'm always from a personal point of view, I was I'm fed up with talking to those people at all. But it was very inspiring for me, even these 10 minutes and hour after talk, how you say stay in contact and stay and still keep on talking and keep on questioning everything. I feel sometimes, and I feel a lot of from people in our city and area and the region and Thalheim and all the cities around, that we are so disappointed and in a way exhausted of talking, but we are solving a lot the question, whom do we still talk to, and when is there an end? And I would really love all the politicians listening to me sometimes, maybe not yet here, but they should really define the limit, and so I don't have to. I feel I have to do this on the street as well. This is maybe not my organization, but a personal point of view.
And I think, and that point came up in the room, right? It came up quite specifically. Do you want to say something about how it came up? Yeah.
So, think that we're having this conversation, which is, how could we help a neighbor who is vulnerable? And none of this, the conversations always start with the shallow part of the conversation, where it's no, we think of this idea, that idea, we could set up a community garden, stuff like that. And suddenly one of the participants says, to be honest, I have a neighbor who's a racist and I really hate him. And I do not want to help, I do not want to consider that he is vulnerable and that I should have to try and help him because I hate him. And it was very interesting that we were able to reach that point in such a short period of time. And I think that's what's powerful about this self-organized learning, that it's things emerge which you would never plan for, you could never expect. And so once she says this, there is this sensation of we are neighbors with the people we do have our problems with, with which we are in complete opposition. But then we were talking with Natasha after it. It's interesting because we didn't talk about the other neighbors. We didn't talk about migrants, for example. And after the keynote on Friday morning, we were okay, but these are also neighbors. We haven't touched about those. So that was the first thing where you realize, okay, there's things which are creating a big tension, but this is a long conversation. This just started. And the other thing which happened, which was very particular, was that at that point, I said, well, did you guys use the internet for anything? And they were like, no, we sat down and we spoke and we had ideas. And there was one group who said, no, we did use it to research how to make beer, because we thought this would be a cool way to get one of these neighbors who beer is a good topic too, that we could have in common. And there was the moment where I said, well, if you have to face somebody who you do not agree with at all, how could you approach that? And I gave the example of how in Colombia there were peace agreements between the government and the Farc guerrilla, being two groups that probably would never sit down one with the other to negotiate. There are strategies for that. And I said, what if you research about that? Because then you could learn of other places around the world which have had to deal with this experience to use it in your personal experience. And then came another very strong side saying, I do not want to talk. Another participant said, I do not want to talk about this. I do not want to talk about how I'm going to try and enter in conversation with this person who's racist. And well, it just lets you understand, okay, this really has a lot of work to be done. But it's interesting because in very little time, these things came out. And then you can realize, that's where the important question is. That's the real question that we have to ask ourselves next. And that's the one with which, if we did this again, that's where we would go.
And that's what I wanted to kind of take you to a little bit, Sanjay, because one of the things that I know is really interesting about the self-organized learning methodology environment, I always say methodology, is that, I think there's two things, right? One is the role that the internet plays in that space. Because, as you say, sometimes people don't use it, sometimes they do. But even the conversation about what it should be used for is somehow actually a trigger to take you deeper and further. And you've told me about this before, not for this session specifically, but for other work. So I wanted to ask you to just explain what you feel is the role of the internet in that space. And I think also building on that, what happens, so you said, this is what we would do if we continued. So this is not the full soul, right? The one that you did yesterday. It's a starting point. If you were doing this to continue, you would actually deepen. And so I think if you could explain those two things from your methodology, that'd be great.
So in a soul space, you have less computers than people, always one computer every 4 or 5 people. Everybody's looking at the same screen, and it has to be a big screen. No, you can't do it with a phone, because with a phone you can't share. No, it's not like the 3 of us can't see, it's too small. And so you need to have a big screen, and when you have the internet in a conversation, you have this thing of, we're not talking only of opinions. No, we can verify stuff, we can look for stuff, we can say, wait, let me see what I can find. And when you have 20 people looking for the answer to the same question in 4 groups or 5 groups, you have 5 different answers for the same question. And depends on what you write in Google. Some people will reach one link and some will reach another one. And it's interesting because what you're doing in this moment of harvesting the answers is that you're seeing what we should all be doing with the internet, which is verifying sources and being able to say, well, I found something different. And what did you find? And so the role of internet there is really allowing us to not only find information, but to be able to contrast information. And that's one big part of the role of a self-organized learning environment. The second thing is that together with the soul concept, there is a thing called the granny cloud. And so the guy who invented this discovered that it's more important, he did research on this, and he says it's more important to have somebody warm and encouraging in a learning process than to have somebody who's an expert. Because somebody who's warm and encouraging accelerates learning processes dramatically. So he invented this idea of the granny. And so why is it a granny? Because my granny says, Sanjay, I really don't understand what you do, but tell me more. That's so cool. No, how did you do that? And so the Granny Cloud is basically a network of volunteers, men and women of all ages, I'm also a granny, whose role is to connect remotely with a soul, to not teach, but to be a granny, to be there and saying, what are you finding out about? How did you do it? Oh, that's so cool. So yesterday we had Belen. She's like an awesome granny. She lives in Madrid and sometimes in Colombia, and she connected remotely with this conversation. And the interesting thing about that is that there's where the internet plays a different role, because you have somebody who's not from the group, somebody who's external, somebody who's like, I wouldn't say neutral, but I would say somebody who can give you a different point of view, being external from the group, participating from the group. And when that happens, the interactions of the people who see each other every day change completely, no? So maybe the people who came, they reacted differently because there's someone who they don't know who's on the other side of the screen. They're talking to them about something which, like, it's the first time. And I think that brings people sort of like barriers and things down, no? People sort of chill, and that's where they use the experience. So I think what's interesting about the soul concept is that we are changing the way the internet is used, no? For now, the internet has been used for like individual experiences, no? We're being tracked by Google and Amazon, and everybody's tracking us, Twitter, everybody's tracking us all the time. But when you have 4 people in front of a screen, it's not so easy to track us. And what's interesting about that is that, well, we don't want to go into Facebook if we're 4 people, because it's like, I don't want to go and look at your Facebook. I want to look at my Facebook. I don't have Facebook. But I would. Yeah. So what do? Let's answer a question. And when you realize that answering questions is a big thing, then you realize that asking questions is an important thing. And you only learn to ask questions by asking questions. So what I see, the power behind the internet is this possibility of making everybody curious again, and allowing people to ask questions, and allowing people to get together to answer them. So it's not only about the internet, it's about the space where you do it, no? Where you come together, and well, that's the connecting spaces.
Yeah, I love that. And I also think the granny cloud may be one of my favorite peacebuilding and kind of inventions, digital peacebuilding via the granny cloud. So there's this methodology that Sanjay, tested out yesterday in Chemnitz. And I wanted to ask you, Frauke, what you think about what comes next. So what comes next in this conversation that started yesterday in that room, and what comes next if ASAFF were to somehow start using something similar to this soul methodology?
I think what comes next is like the natural step, but you need time for that. Is always, if you get some connection, and we got some new people we just heard about, they have new ideas. We invited them from Chemnitz, so they are now in a connection with us. So now it's the next step is to keep that connection. Ask them. I get really much received a lot of positive reactions from yesterday's environment, and so I will ask them again, invite them to continue this, and I will use the internet for staying in contact, and WhatsApp, of course. Stay in contact with Natasha and Sanjay and the whole soul community. So we try to work together again with Chemnitz. So deepen the international inspiration and have the space, not only focusing on us, which is really important and crucial, I think, for our work, but open the space and invite via internet, but probably there's some cultural city coming up, so there might be some possibility to invite international people to ask and listen to us again, because this what these 3 days were about, and they really made a very good atmosphere, and that's what I would like to continue.
I want to this wasn't on script, so now I'm just improvising, because I'm really interested in this thing, and I've heard you say this as we were organizing the conference as well, right? Which is that you, and we were talking about it in the tram as well, you feel that the sort of the international presence and almost like an international gaze or an outside gaze is helpful to unblocking some of the conversations, some of the difficult conversations that came up in the room, some of the difficult conversations that you yourself say, I don't know if I want to have these, but that somehow that outside presence, and that is also, I think, your hope for the fact that Chemnitz is the European Cultural Capital in 2025, right? So can you say a bit more about that? Why is it that you think if you stop looking in and you have this opening, it'll help unblock some of the local conversations?
You get a new perspective very easily. This is with all the questions you ask or your remarks to what you see or what you didn't see, maybe probably, or to the topics from Chemnitz. This was so inspiring. to continue. And it's also not only inspiring, but it's questioning sometimes. And of course, there's also an incident, not I call it incident, but it's a racist attack. And this is also doing something with us. So this is not only questioning, but this is something we experience now. And I tell a lot to the news that we still have to learn a lot to get more international in this city. So did you? Oh, I heard that you had some English announcement in the tram or something like. So there were funny situations. But let's continue on that. Like let's have this city and this area like as normal as possible, as the rest of the world, like internationally. That's my dream, my vision, and it was like utopian 3 days, and I would love people to keep all these like utopian ideas, because otherwise you don't change the world. Pathetic. Sorry.
I just want to repeat one thing. Then, of course, I'll pass over to you, which is that I think this vision that you just shared is actually the reason that we ended up in Chemnitz, right? That your passion and your vision has really brought the conference here. So I just want to say thank you, because I loved hearing that kind of thought that went behind, why that's here. And one other thing that I want to say, and I'll pass over to you, Sanjay, after that, is that you were saying like these 3 days were utopian, but they were also manifesting something else, and that was always the invitation. So it's not. It's actually, this is the future that you're hoping for, and you're kind of manifesting it already, and then it can carry forward. So I love that was the vision. Sanjay, you wanted to say something?
No, I was also going to add on to that, because, and I want to give you like a parallel of what's happening in Colombia. So this utopia, which it's not a utopia, it's what we want. No, we want to live better together. We want to live well together, and we know we can do it, and we are the ones who are in charge of changing that. And I want to do the parallel because, so I've been trying to go to these areas in Colombia, of the areas most affected by armed conflict, since the peace agreement in 2016. And 2017 was like a dream year. Everybody thought, wow, this is a moment of opportunity. And 2018, we got a new government, and everything really went backwards tremendously. For 4 years, violence, killing of social leaders, everything. And it was really a downer, a big downer. And suddenly this year, being able to go to these places, I've been trying to do this for 6 years, and now I finally get to do it. And you go to these places, and the people, when they receive you, they live in really tough situations, but when they receive you, it's like, this is so cool that you came here. No? Why did you come here? And these people are in the middle of a little village, in the middle of a faraway place, and suddenly they're connected to the internet with somebody who's in, I don't know, Portugal, or they're in Bolivia, in Chile, or in Bogota, and they feel connected. No, they feel like they're not alone. They've been historically isolated for so long, no? And the geography and everything, and then suddenly, peace agreement said, no, we have to bring roads, and we have to put schools, and we have to, but that hasn't happened, no? It's like, the reason why these places are in conflict is because they're far, and it's difficult to be there, the state to be there, but then you have the internet, and the internet is there. And so these people realize, I can use this to be able to be in contact with you, and now I'm not alone, and now somebody can listen to me, and somebody is interested in my story. And I think that's what's very powerful. But it's also the power of saying, I can also learn on my own with my people. We can learn on our own what it is that we need to learn to solve our problems. And the only thing we have to figure out is which is the question we need to do that. And I think that is very powerful in understanding. We go one day, a couple of hours to say, like what we did yesterday. Now you can do it because it's very simple. No, that's the power of self-organized learning. It's so simple that it's so powerful, and you couldn't have done it as it's been done now because of the internet. And once people realize that everything which they had as curiosity is now valid, I think that's a powerful moment of like hopefulness, and we should like put all our energy into it.
Thank you, Sanjay. And so I think if Frauke gave us this hopeful vision for what she sees in the future of Chemnitz, I love that you've given us a hopeful vision of the internet, because we did talk a lot, or maybe I talked a lot in the beginning, about how the internet is not making me feel great about our capacity to connect at the moment. And then we had, a guy sharing yesterday about Twitter and what's happening on Twitter. But the internet is also a space of connection, right? It is also a connecting space, or it can be. And I think that Soul shows that, and your work in Colombia shows that, and I love that, because the internet does have that capacity, and in many ways I think maybe that was the original vision of what the internet was for. It was a space for connection. So thank you both so much. We're out of time. Can we have a big round of applause for...
Thank you.